Okay, diving straight in. We're hitting the menu button. We're going to input and output. And we're going to go to the input. So we press the button underneath input. And here you'll see I've got +3. We're on the Gibson Les Paul. We're on the neck pickup. And if I just strum, we've got no blocks on. So we're just hearing the direct in. You'll see my signal is coming when I strum strongly halfway between the last line here and the line where the triangle is. When I go to my back pickup, you'll see it's hotter, and occasionally hits that line, goes over it. So I need to be careful with that, and I've done my level with this in mind. If I did my back pick, my bridge pickup, so let's say it's a couple of dB hotter, so that's where I would want that. But now when I go to my back pickup, it's just slightly too strong. Okay, so I've pulled that back and I'm going with a +3 there. Seems to do me a treat. Okay, so don't have too little signal coming in. You want it in between this space here. Too little signal is no good to you at all. So now we're going to do the main out and the sub out. And I run mine differently to yours because I'm running bass through here and guitar. I'm a live looper. But I'm going to talk to you about how you get exactly the same signal to both. I don't know if you know, in factory, your sub outs are very, very hot. And I'm going to show you what I discovered along the way. So we're going to go into the main out. And I set my main out probably a bit like you. I set it to recording so I can change the speakers. Just going to come out of there. Going to go into the global EQ now, and I only use this if I have a trouble room live. You'll see everything here is set flat until I get to the end here where I've got a high cut at 10 and my low cut is at 40. Now as a guitarist I would normally have that at about 80 or 100. I actually do low cuts within my patches at 125 Hertz inside of a mix. But I run a bass through here, remember, and I want to capture some of those sub frequencies. So I do my low cut here at 40 because I'm also a bass player. And that's how that EQ is set. Now, if I got to a room that was boomy, I would just make an adjustment in here. Or if I needed to pull some more highs out, I'd pull that out as well. Now, in the output level, I've got it set to +4 dB. And I'm running the master knob at 12 o'clock. Now I've run my master knob all over the place, and this next bit's really important. Wherever you set your master knob, if you're looking to get the same signal out of your sub outs, you need to level it. Now we're now going to go into the sub out, and you'll see everything is the same. I'm set to recording here. Let's come back. Let's go into the global EQ. My EQ is flat again, with the same high-low cut at 10 and 40. But now when we come to the output level, you get options here, and they give you options for very good reason. I'm still choosing +4 dB, but at +4 dB, when I run an AB on the direct in with no amps or any blocks on at all, to get the same signal out of the sub outs as the main outs, I had to drop it to 29. That's almost half. When it comes as factory, it comes at 50, but actually to level out the subs to the main out is 29, I found. So we're going to come out of there. I just want to show you one last thing. I'm going to go along to the total block. In here, I don't know if you know this, but you've got control over your reverb, and there's a good reason for this. When you play in a venue, different venues of different sizes have their own reverb, their natural reverb. So when I'm running into if I'd be running this into a computer, or in this case into my loopers, I run here the reverb level at 200%, so it's super duper wet. Now if I got to a venue like a church hall or a massive hall with a really big reverb, I could control all of the reverbs across all of the patches just by dialing this back to where it comes as factory. Now in factory, when you receive your unit, it comes here at 100%. You'll be like, oh, my reverbs are a bit weak. They don't sound like palms. If you don't know about this part, you won't be getting the wetness you deserve. So, yeah, let's come out of there. And now we're going to go into a patch. So this is going to be a natural amp. And what I want to do is I'm going to talk you through this signal chain, because this is how all the following amps that I'm going to be doing, these deep dive videos, are going to be set. The only things that will change is the EQ block, the mic block, and the amp. Now, you'll notice I come in here and then I split my signal. I'm running 2 amps. Now here, in the A channel, I'm now going to turn on this amp. You'll notice we sound louder and not as bassy. Now this amplifier at the moment is just a natural amp. I'm going to show you something with that and a boutique amp in a moment. But I'm using the 212s. I'm using the dynamic 421 microphone. I've got it set short in the middle of the cone there, and we've got none of the direct mix coming through. This here is my HX effects, and just to note, if you're running signals in, GT1000 is very hot, and you'll probably find you've got different output coming from the unit that you're coming into your GT1000. What I found to get the HX effects when none of the blocks were on and it wasn't colouring my sound, I actually found I had to balance the ins and the outs, and here I ended up with 85 as being the send and 83 as being the return, to get a clean tone that didn't sound like it was affected by the HX effects before I put any blocks on. Okay, so just be aware of that if you're using your ins and outs there. We'll dive deeper into that in later videos. I want to try and keep this video shortish. Now, this amplifier, I'm just going to show you the settings I got to. We're going to do an actual deep dive into this amp, so I'm just going to scroll along the pages here so you can see what my settings are. Just pause yourself or whatever, and you'll see here we're on the low gain, and I've got all of these patches that we're going to go into over the next few videos set up so that when I press a control here, notice you're in low gain, and now in the bottom left hand corner you'll see we've changed to high gain, the same amp. So my high gain and my low gain are in the same amp in this particular patch, and it's running as a wet dry. What that means is the signal is coming through here and at my mains. I then run a separate amp to my sub outs, in this case an X Crunch, that has got my wet effects on it, and they are running 100% wet. So if I take off, how are you going to do that, Paul? Let's turn that to single and just put that there. So we're only listening to my wet channel. Okay, and there's my reverb with a ring modulator in it. So let's just come back here. I'm going to go into how I set that up in a bit more detail in another video. I want to stay on with gain staging. So here, I want to add to my clean amp here, and we're only going to be working on this channel at the moment. I want to add a bit of EQ to clean up my amplifier, and I want to add a compressor. So I'm going to turn on a noise gate for a minute. Good practice. And then I've got my first EQ. Now when I use this microphone, the 421, it's got like a mid boost. Okay, so what I find here is I sometimes make an adjustment in the lows here at 160, and I take a chunk of 500 hertz out on quite a wide Q. The important thing here is when I introduce this, when I turn that block on, you'll notice my volume level hasn't changed. What you might not notice, because I'm talking, that's it off, that's it on with a clean tone. We won't hear that. I'll turn to a distortion in a minute. I don't want to do our heads in for the second. Important that your level isn't too much or too little. For example, if I leave that at 0, having made the adjustment I made, that's the sound without the EQ. When I put the EQ on, my sound dropped there. So you want to level it. Now I know that's the same level, and you'll notice it's just slightly thinner. I've taken those low mids out, and I leave the high cut and low cut in this EQ untouched, because in this EQ I'm dealing with what's going on in the highs that I want to get rid of. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put on the distortion. So this is the dirty channel. I've got it set at the moment, where are we? We're on a gain of, is that 80? Yeah, a gain of 80. We're running the amp levels here. They're are the bass, middle and treble for you. Again, I'm going to do a deep dive in a little minute. I want to show you something with these amps in a second. But you can hear a bit high-end energy there. That if we went to the SM57 sounds quite nice there, but I want that mid-range energy in this. So what I'm going to do now is cut out some of that. Now here what I'm also going to do is do a post EQ boost there in the high, which is like a high shelf, just to bring out the tops. I'm going to turn off my EQ. Turn it on, and my level should be the same. It's just taking the lows out. So what I'm doing here, this 4 here, when I dive into the EQs properly, what I've done is, if you do a boost here, go to about 10. Now on 10, most frequencies sound dirty, but listen to that, it's horrible. What we're going to do is we're going to scoot up so you can, just changing here. Not nice. Not too bad. So what I've done is I go to that 4 and I pull it out on quite a tight Q, sorry. I should have been on a tighter Q when I was doing that. I can't really see what I'm doing. It's dark in here, my eyes are failing me. I've also taken a little bit of the 6.5K out. But you actually don't need to take much out on this, I've found. Now, the important thing there is to level your EQ. You don't want it too quiet, but you definitely don't want it too loud when you turn it on. Okay? So if I have a situation where when I turn my EQ on, let's put that like that. That's too loud at the moment, right? So off, that sounds like that. That's boosted it. Now I don't want to boost, I'm not using it as a boost. We're going to go into EQs at a later date and how to use them as a boost. But I want to keep my signal under control at this point, or my gains aren't going to be working very well for me. Now then, what I want to just quickly show you on before, actually let's get the compressor on. So if you want to see my compressor settings here, I'm just using the Boss Comp. There's the settings, there's page 2. I'm just going to engage it. Now you'll feel the signal get fuller. Let's go to a clean sound. So without. You felt a slight lift there, but there's no reading louder on the dB meter, it's just the compressor working, making the signal sound fuller. Now, what I wanted to show you here is, when I dial in an amp, I generally do it without the EQ, okay? Now, I just want to show you the difference between this amp and the boutique amp. And this difference happens on every amp. So when you go into each of the amps, don't think that taking the same strategy is going to work for you on each of the amps. These are like real world amps in a way. I mean, we try to compare them to real world amps, but you shouldn't do that. You should just take them as amps in their own right, because every amp is different anyway. Even you get two Marshall of the same and they'll sound different. But in this case, it's looking at where the EQ section of the amp is, if it's in the power amp section or in the preamp section. So for example, if I take away everything here, just to see what things do. I'm going to stay on bright because I quite like this on a bright. Presence isn't going to do much with not much else in, but if you noticed how all of our volume has gone, we haven't changed the gain or the level here, and this tells us these settings are sitting in the preamp section. Okay, so let's have a little look at what's happening in the bass end. It's quite smooth. Let's get rid of that. The mids on this are quite nosy. Let's bring the trebles in. Okay, so then let's go to a high gain. Now my amp is set, so all my settings change in the assigns. So this is it without anything happening here in the EQ. See what that bass does. Let's pull that out. See what the MIDI. Gets more of a woof as you get higher up there. And then your treble on its own. You see when you get quite high there, it's quite piercing, but let's get our EQ on that. Let's not for a second, let's wait. Hang about. Now then, what I'm going to do is hit my button, and that restores me back to my settings. Now I've shown you that, I want to show you this. This is a boutique amp, and I've gone through the same processes. Let's turn that compressor on. Gone through the same processes, but check out what happens with this amp. Complete loss of the volume here. And I would go through each of these, just listening to. It's nowhere near as aggressive as the low on the natural amp. Let's pull them out. Let's pull this up. They're not too harsh, they're quite nice. Where did I end up? And I would go through each amp doing that until I've pulled it to a level. And I usually start out with the volume depending on what the amp is. I mean, you can see in this case I've got the gain, it's a high gain boutique amp. And I've got the gain only at 50, but I'm driving the volume level. If I was to drop that, gain up. Once I've got this part of my amplifier sitting right with these levels at a level, now when I'm bringing my gains in, they're actually working like a gain. I'm not bringing in loads of fizz. Let's just pull that back. Where was I? Had it. Turn that off. And let's just put on the wet channel of this. Now what I've been doing in these patches is putting in my reverbs. Oh, a little thing here to note. So if this was set up, right, I run this as wet, dry, wet. So if I turn off those, disengage my delay, you'll hear, right, that's an amp on its own up the middle. When I press this button, I've now engaged this channel. I've got what sounds like 2 amps sitting either side of this amp. So I'm splitting this here at this divide with a left. You go left, right, you come into here in dual, go out of there, left, right, and you get a better stereo spread. Put the spread in the middle there at 50, but if you do slightly different EQs on either side, it gives you a more authentic stereo spread, or a better stereo spread. But what's interesting here is, listen to this delay. This is space echo. I don't know if you know, all your delays are stereo. So I'm going to engage the delay by engaging this divide, and I only do that to keep it separate to the reverb, but just for the moment, you can hear the delay is either side of you, it's left and right, it's stereo. Okay? If I move that delay, put it before this, disengage that, and now let's make this a wet dry patch that is not stereo, as in wet dry wet. This is just wet dry. So I've got 1 amp coming through here, not 2 as I had a minute ago. Listen to my delay. Now it's mono. So I don't know if you realise this, all of your delays, although they say stereo and mono in them, they can work as stereo if you place them after a stereo divide. So let's turn this back into dual. I'm going to put that into stereo left right, and now my delay is either side of my ears. So I'm just going to, oh, didn't want to do that, I wanted to do this. Let's put the delay back in there because I only want that to engage when that comes on. Let's put the effects on. So let's turn. Okay, so this is just I've just stuck in a hall reverb, got a long trail on it. There's the settings. But what I have done, and what's important here when you're running these wet dries, is to run this level at 0, so it's just spitting out reverb. And now when I here in this case I've put in a rotary. Can you feel that reverb moving around? Let's just increase that drive a bit. Turn it right up. That's way too much for me. But probably about this. Yeah, and that's how you put effects into your reverb. Now, if I come across here, you'll see the direct mix is all the way up. Remember, there's no original guitar signal coming from the reverb. All it is 100% wet. So I want all of that reverb coming in. If that's at 0, what I get is just the affected sound with the rotary. But I want the reverb coming through as well. There it is. Now, just to reference something from earlier, we're going to go into the in-out settings, we're going to go to the total, we're going to go to the reverb, and look, this is how it comes as factory. So if you're in factory and you've set your settings as mine, but it doesn't sound like mine, it could be this. Turn that up. Much wetter. So, actually it'd be easier to tell that without that one. But we're there now. Let's have a look at one last one before we go. I'm going to say goodbye in a minute. Going to say goodbye, and let's have a look at this. Let's engage the wet. It's all set up the same way. All I did is change what the effects block does and what delay I've got in there. You'll notice exactly the same. So when we go through these patches, what this gives me the ability to do is focus on my very dry tone. You can see here, when just this channel is engaged, I've got no effects. And the important thing with doing your effects is not to sound too processed. And I find running this way, I don't sound too processed. You can run side chains and things, they sound good, but I still sounded too processed. And now I'm running like this, I feel like I'm getting... That sounds like a recorded amp in a room to me. And that sounds like the kind of effects you put in post-production. Okay, so the next video will be a deep dive into an amp. I'll catch you later.